Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Anybody fearing evil nowadays? No. Nobody has any fear. Nothing can get you, right? So I have one page, 2 sides handout. I've got 10 pages. Oh, here we go. You can hold it up in front of the camera. And it's simply some passages connected with contagion. Did sort of a word search on that. And also looked at the resources in the online. We have such resources nowadays. Looking at several articles and papers and addresses related to the nature of evil, as well as the 1956-58 book by Reverend Dr. Hugo Odener called Spirits and Men, where the last basically 2 to 3 chapters are on the nature of influx from heaven and hell, but the nature of influx that affects our state of mind and body, and on the nature of diseases. So the sheet I've handed out to you is a collection of passages from the writings themselves, and then I want to talk somewhat perhaps about the articles I've read and a section out of that book. We'll say that there was a very good article in 1983. It was by Eric Carswell called I Will Fear No Evil. It was an address given to the Council of the Clergy of that year, 1983. Jim and I were just newly in the ministry. And Eric had been in there for a couple of years before. So he was a young man in 1983. Not many years. No, I think he graduated a few years before us. And but he gave a paper that the end of which was, how do we let fear affect the way we govern the church? So I thought that was quite telling. Not telling, but it was neat to read his questions about how we organize ourselves around the fear of losing our children or new church education. Do we organize ourselves around the fear of losing our church communities or church congregations by getting into communities like they did in Bernathen and Glenview, but not in Toronto. They did in Carndale, but not in Detroit. Or at least originally. The second embodiment of Detroit was a community of people gathered around the proximity of the church. So to begin with, because the coronavirus is now pretty much on everyone's minds, and it should be, I believe it's important for us to be aware when something is dangerous around us, that we don't ignore it, stick our heads in the sand. How significant this virus is. If you live in Italy, it's very significant. If you live in China, it's really significant. Is it Iran that is also heavily affected by it? And now that could happen in any one of any country where a person comes and infects people. Talking with Elaine Kim this afternoon, she became very animated talking about the South Korean group of worshipers that are called New Heaven and New Earth, or Heaven on Earth. I'm not sure what the particular name is, but they kind of co-opted some of the teachings from the New Church and kind of made a cultish thing that's very secretive. So they are all in close proximity. They all worship bowing down in similar form as Muslims do, very close together. And evidently an outbreak there has led to quite an outbreak. They're not disclosing the numbers like they ought to, because it's very secretive if you belong to this spiritual community. I'm not sure if that's part of the political culture of South Korea, but also the nature of a cult, if that is indeed a cult that we're talking about, but that's what I heard. So with her own ties to that part of the world, she was quite animate in talking about how severe it is. And I just heard this morning that a section of New York City called New Rochester? New Rochelle. New Rochelle. I don't know where it is. I grew up in New York, but I don't know if it was in Queens or Bronx or where, where exactly it is. But evidently they put a perimeter of a mile circle around the epicenter of the disease there to contain it. So what does that have to do with our spiritual lives? Diseases in the natural world are connected with diseases in the spiritual world. If there weren't evil, there wouldn't be disease. There would be the natural decay and decline of all things physical, and our bodies would age and die in old age because we're done, but not diseased. So let me just go through these passages that talk about the nature of contagion, if you wouldn't mind. I don't know if anybody would like to read the first one from 57:11, all diseases. Okay.
All diseases with man have correspondence with the spiritual world, for whatever in universal nature should have no correspondence with the spiritual world, this could not exist, for it would have no cause from which it existed, consequently from which it could subsist. In nature there is nothing but effects. Their causes are in the spiritual world.
So all diseases have a correspondence with the spiritual world. So you don't get a disease that hasn't already been in the other world, in hell, due to the correspondence of the way evil and falsity interact within the heart and mind of individual spirits and devils and Satans, and that they love or lust for certain things, find ways to manage to justify and to ratiocinate about certain loves, and that is a sickness. That's not healthy. It's not spiritually healthy, and it therefore, as a natural or spiritual sickness, is also correspondent with natural illnesses. Is it okay to read, Jerry, over down here, or do I have to read everything so people can hear? Okay. Anybody like to read the next one? Karen.
Every disease in the human race is from spiritual evil because from sin.
What can you say about that? Pretty straightforward, right? So every evil is from sin. The wages of sin are death. Now that can be quite abused as a passage. I don't know exactly which book of the epistles that is from, but it is a pretty good quote. Jim, do you want to read the next one, Arcana 57:12?
Yes. The origins of diseases in common are intemperance, luxuries of various kinds, pleasures merely of the body, also envyings, hatreds, revenges, lasciviousness, and the like.
Well, that's bringing it down to earth, isn't it? Correspondences is, all right, sin, okay. Now we're talking about particulars. The origin of diseases in common. So if people were fit and healthy and they ate the right amount, they didn't give themselves over to luxurious over everything, over indulgences, which is the same as intemperance or luxury. Pleasures merely for the body. How many of those do we love to enjoy? Pleasures merely for the body.
Do you think it's the same all over the world?
Yes. I think it's pretty universal. Yeah.
Some places seem to have more disease and stuff because of sanitation or whatever.
Yes, it does have to do with being clean as well. So sanitation is a huge aspect of disease once disease has been created. But the first sickness was the desire to have life and believe and live as if it were not God's but our own. So the serpent in the garden, the slithering, sensuous aspect of our nature's desiring to act as if it's more than it is, rising up to a higher level. So that desire to have life not just as if it were our own, but as our own, is the beginning of evil. And that is also the beginning of all those other things. Intemperance, wanting more than you need because you want me. Luxuries, pleasures merely of the body. And then envying. Now that's the last two commandments, right? Not coveting. But really, all the commandments have to do with some form of wanting that which is somebody else's because it's what you want for yourself. You want to make yourself powerful because you want power that belongs to God. So the first four of the commandments all have to do with taking that which is God's and not giving it back to God, but claiming it for yourself. Having other gods, not taking that which is the Lord's and keeping it holy, the Sabbath, the Lord's name, honoring father, which is the Lord, and mother, which is the Lord in and amongst the community, or heaven, which is the church, or spiritual mother, honoring mother and father. And then the other commandments related to stealing, lying, adultery, murder, and coveting all have to do with really envying or taking that which is not ours and trying to make it our own. Reflections on that? Is that agreeable? How could you say that evil could come from any other place but the proprium, which is what is our own, or what we believe to be our own? You have a thought, Jim, I can tell.
I'm trying, I don't want to jump ahead and anticipate where you're going, but the questions come up, okay, how do little children get ill? They have no evil.
They got it from us.
Well, I understand. So what you have to do is you can't identify this and say, oh, you have breast cancer because you're angry. So if you give up your anger, your cancer will be cured. Yeah. That gets...
You got to be careful.
You can't do that. You can't have this one-to-one and say that, oh, you have a particular sin, so you get that particular sickness. But you can say that the origin of all illness comes in general from the hells, right, and there's a general influx into human beings that allows us to fall into these things. But my particular illness is not a result of a particular sin that I can cure by repenting. That's where I'm going.
Okay. Let's keep reading these passages. The other ones that are mentioned here: envy, hatred, revenge, lasciviousness, and the like. So envy, hatred, and revenge are all less bodily, less physical. Lasciviousness can be more connected, you might say, with the state of the body. That the nature of sexual lasciviousness is connected with the nature of the vitality of the body. I'll go and read the next passage. And all the infernals induce diseases. When a person falls into diseases, they then flow into such unclean things as are the products of the disease, and they aggravate it. It's from 57:13. The next passage after 57:12. I believe that's from a section in the inner chapter material in the Arcana concerning the grand man.
But you see, the interesting thing is when people get disease, then evil spirits flow in.
Right.
It's not the other way around.
Yeah. So there's a general influx into humanity based on sin originating in the most ancient church, or even amongst the pre-Adamites. Diseases, not really sure. It doesn't break it down. I didn't find the answer to that. When did the first person have the first cold, or stub their first toe and it got an infection? Because if you stubbed your toe and there were no evils around, would you get an infection? I don't know. Yes, definitely. That's a whole new category in one sense. And the mental illnesses that are connected with spiritual illnesses, like if you're very, very envious, contemptuous, and full of hatred, you're not mentally healthy. If you're in an obsessive compulsive mindset about your rival, your adversary, always thinking about what they're doing next and how you can affect them or how they're affecting you. That kind of enmity, hatred, contempt. It's the source of, or the origin of, diseases. And they work together, hand in hand. Arcana 666, 6. From such spirits, the hells are at this day immensely increased, and wonderful to say, not wonderful in the good sense, especially from those who are within the church, on account of the cunning, deceit, hatred, revenge, and adultery, which flourished there more than elsewhere. For within the church, cunning is now esteemed ingenious, adultery honorable, and they who deem otherwise are laughed at. It being so within the church at this day is a sign that its last time is at hand. For except there be an end, no flesh would be saved, according to the Lord's words in Matthew. Because all evil is contagious and infects, as a ferment infects dough, and thus at length it would infect all. Ew.
A ferment infecting dough is a good thing.
Well, yeah, I don't know if infection is a good I'm not sure. I didn't look up the Latin on that because I saw that. I thought, well, infects the dough? It influences the dough?
Does.
Yeah. If you think about yeast, it's not a virus. Yeast is a yeast. It's a spore. But it just multiplies similarly, I think. I'm not a medical person. I think similarly to a way a virus works. No, not at all.
A virus isn't even alive,
Okay.
but yeast is a plant.
Okay. Thank you. These least vessels with a person, from the hereditary evil into which a person is born, and from actual evils which he has procured for himself, are in a position obstructive to life. Nothing can do evil to the divine, but its influx may be hindered. The divine influx may be hindered. And all evil has this effect. So yeah, it's cumulative. The more evil, the less influx the divine is having into us, because evil and falsity grow and multiply like leaven in the dough. Now the Lord used leaven, the leavening in the dough, as a good thing, to say that the kingdom of God is like dough that is leavened, but also the evil of hell is like a leavened dough, which is why we have unleavened bread, but we have leavened or changed wine in relationship to the mind and the human understanding, changing in a way according to the truth, whereas the will itself has to be the Lord's goodness coming in. We don't get to change evil into good. The Lord can help us change the appearances of truth, which may in fact be falsified or fallacies, into appearances which can serve for the sake of better understanding. Not to get too much into that doctrine. So here's one of the better known passages about the contagion of evil that comes up from the True Christian Religion 120, subsection 2 and 3. If a person lives for a time with robbers and pirates, he finally becomes like one of them. Here, Karen, you can have your own sheet. Really, I've got plenty. You can't look at it. Here. Oh, you can't hold it. All right. Jim, you keep doing that. You keep letting her see. All right, you are a team. If you live with robbers and pirates, you finally become like them. If one lives with adulterers and harlots, a person soon thinks nothing of adultery. If you mingle with outlaws, you soon think nothing of doing violence to anyone. For all evils are contagious. And may be compared to a pestilence or an outbreak of coronavirus. Which one is it? Compared to a pestilence which is communicated merely by the breath or the effluvia of the body. He coughed into his elbow. Now, here's a interesting one. Or to cancer or gangrene. Can I catch cancer from you if you have cancer? Some cancers I can catch from you, communicated that way. See, I'm not medically informed. I didn't know you could catch gangrene from somebody else either. I thought that was a state of their own body, but you couldn't get it. Kind of like you can't catch a stubbed toe or can't get pregnant by standing beside somebody.
It's an infection. It's just like, the opening wound and the stuff in the ear gets in it and it starts, it's bacteria.
Gangrenous. Okay.
So, yeah, you could get it from somebody else.
Okay, and I wasn't sure about the cancer one. And Swedenborg's not writing to be giving us medical advice. He's not a doctor. He was a genius, and a genius in medical things, probably beyond many of the doctors of his time. But
well, I think the semicolon here indicates that he's talking about as a different kind of thing. There's stuff that can be spread and communicated by the breath, and then there's cancer, which spreads and infects. Starts as a small thing and then spreads through the whole body.
Right.
It's not necessarily being infecting other people, but what it does is it infects other organs.
Right. Infects its near and then the more remote parts.
Yeah.
Right. Until the whole body is destroyed. The delights of evil into which every person is born are the cause. Every person is born into the ability or the inclination to delight in evil. Very infectious. Here, just smoke a little bit of this and see if you like it. Here, have a drink of this. Oh, taste this. You've never tasted anything this good. You haven't lived until you've been to such and such a place. And, is there a disease connected with roaming all over the world just to see more pleasurable sights? I don't know how the cruise industry would exist if people didn't somewhat have this, not necessarily disease, but the desire to share delightful and pleasurable things. To excess, that's when it becomes dangerous. Similar to, Swedenborg doesn't completely assign all gamblers to hell just because they like to gamble, but it can certainly become an addictive habit that turns into a very destructive way of life. Spreads and infects the nearer and then the more remote parts until the whole body is destroyed. The delights of evil into which every person is born are the cause. From this it can be seen that without redemption by the Lord, no person could be saved, nor could the angels be continued in a state of integrity. So you think about the spiritual world being invaded by hell. And when you think about some of the regimes that have invaded the world, and in our modern times, times in which we've either been alive or our parents or grandparents could tell us about, thinking about the world wars, the spreading of Nazism and the spreading of the Third Reich and Hitler's domain wishing to take over. It spread like basically a cancer or a disease throughout all of Europe.
It's amazing to me that one of the big things with war, disease kills more people than the actual war does.
Yeah, up to modern times. Now, I think we've been able to. Modern wars have been a lot less disease impacted than, say, the First World War, when the outbreak of influenza also came at the end of that war, and so many people were killed in 1918 by things that related to the mustard gas and other diseases or other things that they were.
Previous wars, it was dysentery, cholera, malaria.
Yeah.
These guys go out into very difficult conditions
Camp fever.
with minimal food, minimal temperature extremes, and they get warm, and then they experience these things, and their immune system is shot.
Yeah.
And other things are shot too. Their legs.
Actually, they said in the First World War, when you got out of the trench, you were less likely to die.
In the trench?
Yeah, like more men died from disease than bullets.
Yeah. War is hell.
And I think, wasn't it the Civil War that most of the deaths were infection from the injuries?
Yeah.
Just because they had no antibiotics.
Right.
And they didn't have
Right.
a way of dealing with the injuries.
So I'm thinking the hell Is there physical illness in hell? Because it's all correspondential. And is it,
Well, I don't think anybody's actually all the way healthy in hell. I think everybody in hell is coughing and throwing up and limping around, and they may not necessarily altogether appear that way to each other, but overall their spiritual bodies are infected with their evils and falsities, and they can't be in a total state of spiritual health, because your spiritual body is the state of your loves and your understanding. Yeah. So Swedenborg, when he says he approaches these various these various hells, especially at the end of Conjugal Love, where he talks about the way the four heinous crimes of defloration, lust of variety, rape, and seduction of innocence, that the way those people, men, looked was just horrific. But they didn't look that way to each other, because the Lord graciously allowed the falsity of their own thinking to be the light in which they viewed each other. But from a distance, men were seen with their ankles basically starting at their waist, because they really had no middle section. They had no conjugal love, and not that which corresponds to conjugal love produces in the spiritual body, the groin and the other organs. And they're totally, yeah.
Not fun when the light of heaven shines down there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Which it does from time to time.
Yes. This 69, 6595, that bottom of that sheet there, related to the embalming, signifies preservation still. It's evident from the signification of embalming as being the preservation from the contagion of evil. So it's interesting, I put that in there because it was one of the ones that was just showing, among some other ones, the natural use of keeping evil from spreading, keeping disease from spreading. Embalming, Swedenborg's basically saying, was a way to keep the dead bodies preserved and not get other people sick. Again, I didn't explore that more deeply, but we can see that when somebody is dead, we bury them so that whatever their body produces in terms of contagious diseases wouldn't spread. So because they had a certain way of preserving the bodies of their the Egyptians, they would embalm them. And we do the same thing if we want to be doing that kind of burial where we want to view the dead body. You're going to do something with that body so that it looks like it's not rotting the way it actually is. Strange thing. Yes?
Funny when somebody, you go into a funeral parlor, and the person you're going to see is sitting up in the corner, and people are saying, "Doesn't he look so lifelike?"
Hard to believe he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're so blessed with the teachings of the new church to kind of get us over the hump of wanting to keep the person looking good. You know, yeah, never saw him look so good.
Of sitting up with a drink in his hand.
no, did they do that?
I've seen them.
Well, you're in the motor or in the airplane kind of club, and I'm in the motorcycle club, and the motorcycle guys. Oh, he was an avid biker, and you know the elaborate funeral this one guy got, where they actually had a motorcycle trailer similar to I pull a trailer on my motorcycle, but it was a coffin. The man had died. They built him this coffin. They put him in the coffin. I don't know sure if he was wearing his biker outfit or whatever, but I just was looking at this thing that came up online, and oh, okay, they had hundreds of bikers who knew this fellow. It wasn't a bad club. It was just a group of friends that all biked together, and Billy Bob or whatever the guy's name was went by in his coffin, pulled by another Harley. Okay, let's leave that embalming part.
So you can have a good party. That's why the embalming is there, so you can have the party afterwards, the wake.
Okay. Is that why they embalm people?
Yeah. Is to keep them fresh for the party.
The Egyptians did that too?
No, they did it for eternity.
Okay, yeah.
In a longer view.
10, 1, 3, 4, and 3, 8, 2 are towards the end of the Arcana. Such also are the states of every church from its beginning to its end. And first, it's likewise like a state of infancy, thus of innocence, consequently of love to the Lord, which state is called morning. The second state is a state of light. The third is a state of light and obscurity, which is evening. And the fourth is a state of no evil, no love, and hence no light, which is its night. This is so because evils increase day by day, and insofar as they increase, one person infects another, like a contagion, especially parents their children. Besides that, hereditary evils are successively condensed and so transmitted. Wow. Yeah, we got to break that cycle, and that's what we're told is the reason why we are dedicated to education, church education, spiritual education of ourselves, obviously, first, and then of our children, to help them break that cycle of the increased hereditary evil that has gone through 4 cycles already. The loss of the most ancient, and then the ancient, and then the Jewish church, and then the Christian church. Each a cycle. Now you'd think would be vaccinated by all that spiritual recovery and then downfall and recovery so that we wouldn't fall in, or we would actually be more susceptible to the evils and falsities. Well, it seems like we're not going to be falling as deeply into the hells that the most ancients fell into. The Lord does a lot to preserve us from the contagion of the hells of the most ancient church in its fallen state, the Nephilim, the giants. Although the worst person, as far as I can remember, that Swedenborg encountered in the other world was Charles XII. I believe he's said to be the worst devil in hell. So bad they couldn't find a mate for him on earth, and so he was connected with a really evil spirit from another planet, Mars, I think, if I understand correctly. Not to get too much into personalities, but that's my recollection of the evils into which the later, the fallen Christian church. And if you consider all the depths of truth, that the most ancient church didn't have a visible God the way the later revelations provided for one. So although they fell into persuasions connected with the understanding and will being united, they didn't fall into the falsities that could be made out of the perversions of the truth that had been given to the later churches, the Christian church especially. And therefore I think the fall, the last judgment, the fall of the Christian church, having all the revelation of the Lord's first coming, that the perversions and therefore the falsities into which they fell, and evils into which they justified, or the falsities justifying the evils of their perversion, were worse. But again, I don't know if it's really that important to say, okay, let's have an Olympic test to see which is the very worst of all the hells. All of the hells do provide for us to become sick by means of the evils and falsities they entered into.
Kind of like humanity today too. We say, are people getting worse or better? And in some ways it seems like we're getting worse. And then there's other things that seem like some things are getting better.
Right.
We're just more aware of some of the bad things, and then say child abuse.
Yeah.
100 years ago, it probably was much more widespread. Yeah. Not more widespread, but it wasn't known.
Right.
So it probably happened, but people didn't talk about it, so therefore it didn't seem. And by bringing these things out to light, we do combat them better. But it might seem like it's more rampant now that we know that they exist.
For some things that we now call abuse were actually things that good parents did.
Well, I'm thinking more.
Only if your kid deserved it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of, I've been involved in discussions before.
Right.
Things are better or worse. Because it's hard to say.
You talk about individuals.
Yeah, let's pick on a few people, shall we? Let's name a couple people and let's see if we can
analyze their life.
Yeah. We do have to do that to a certain extent, don't we? I mean, the whole business right now of judging yourself. Are you sick? Are you a possible spreader of coronavirus? Stay home. Get tested and see if you do have the virus, because it would be important to know, if I had it, that I had exposed you all possibly to my contagion. I need to do self-examination. I need not be secretly hiding my state of my body from the world because it's nobody else's business. Well, in a situation like this, but in all situations, really, we're not supposed to be spreading our evils around. We're not supposed to be spreading our diseases around. Remember when AIDS first came out, and wow, who knew who was infecting whom? I know there are cases where people knowingly had the disease and went ahead and infected somebody else as a nice little gift out of hatred and revenge or cruelty to infect somebody with it. (10.382). I afterwards spoke with these spirits at a distance. I asked them, what became of those among them who are evil? They said that on their earth, and this is related from Earth and the universe, it is not allowable to be wicked. But that if anyone thinks and does what is evil, he is chided by a certain spirit who threatens him with death if he persists in so doing. And if he still persists, he dies by a swoon. And by this means the people of that earth are preserved from the contagion of evils. Yeah.
Your work be done.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, stop doing that. Hey, gone. There is that element in other passages from the writings that are basically saying that the use of fear in keeping evil in check. For certain people and for the hells, that is the only means by which people will be kept in check, is fear of being caught and fear of being punished, and therefore being deprived of their pleasures, and also then having pain induced. So the fear of being of loss and the fear of pain keeps the hells in order. What else could possibly work? Nothing. If I got nothing to lose, I'll do whatever I want. If I'm evil, my conscience isn't bothering me. I don't have a conscience. I'm not caring what God thinks.
It's mostly fear of loss of honor, reputation, gain. That's pretty good, effective tool.
Yes, on earth.
Yes.
In hell,
it's all gone.
yeah, I mean, they're already living in that state where they can't pretend they're anything other than what they are. You're in that state. They can lie to each other and produce fantasies so that you don't look the way you really are, and therefore people approach one another as if they're nice, but that only lasts as long as the person they're approaching doesn't really have their spiritual awareness turned on, or they're sort of allowing themselves to come into relationships like that because they're getting something out of it too.
Punishments too.
That's what you're saying. Pain.
Severe punishments, pain.
Pain. The only thing that seems to work.
So the nature of these people is that, well, you're going to get caught, you're going to die. If you don't quit it, you're going to get killed. Fall into a swoon and die. Yeah, suffocate and choke out. Yeah. I mean, there could be worse deaths, right? Yeah? Okay. You just feel kind of numb and then go to sleep and wake up in the other world. You can't hurt anybody else the way you were hurting the people on earth. Because the nature of evil is contagious.
Do they have any freedom?
Yeah,
Yes.
it sort of begs the question of what happens if the first time you do something wicked and persist in it, that you're gone and you don't have a chance to repent.
Yeah, I think obviously it's a little bit more, it's a little bit better
There's a
than...
little more instruction in this
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah. They don't just kill them the second time. One strike, two strikes, you're out.
He persists in so doing.
Persisting. That's, I think, the key word is...
You don't remember which planet this was?
No, I could, you could take the sheet home and look it up. I think it's not one of the planets of our solar system. I think it's third or fourth planet in the starry heavens. I can't remember. On this planet Jupiter, it says that their planet can only sustain so many people, and so they only live a certain number of years and then they die. And they don't worry about it because they've done what they can do on Earth. They've reproduced children, they've raised a family, and so they get the vision of somebody with a bald head, which corresponds to the loss of the natural, hair being a natural thing. And they know that within about a year or so, and Jupiter year is pretty long, so I'm not really sure what that means. They know they're going to die, and they make preparations, say goodbye to their loved ones, and say, "I'll see you, on the other side." And probably, if they marry people around the same age, partners don't have much longer either. So strange. I'm a person who does think there's more to that than meets the eye on the literal sense. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's not just about that. Conjugal love, boy, I missed putting in the reference from conjugal love. Rationality thus opens and is accomplished only through wisdom. This is going in a little different direction now. Then, when the inner faculties of the rational mind have been opened, the person becomes an image of wisdom, and this wisdom is the receptacle of truly conjugal love. The wisdom which forms this image and receives this love is rational and at the same time moral wisdom. Rational wisdom views the truths and good virtues that inwardly appear in a person, not as qualities belonging to him, but as qualities flowing in from the Lord. And moral wisdom shuns evil and falsities as contagious diseases, especially lascivious ones which contaminate his conjugal love, his or her conjugal love. So yeah, the awareness, the sensitivities of moral wisdom are to keep us spiritually healthy, to keep our marriages healthy from the contagion of adulterous and lascivious, wanton, wandering lusts. Now here's a hard section in conjugal love. It's connected, the next passage, 253 of conjugal love, talking about the legitimate causes of separation. Physical deficiency. Physical faults do not mean the accidental as in occurring not just by accident but occasionally occurring, which may befall one partner or the other during a marriage and pass over. It's chronic diseases which do not pass, which are meant. Their listing is due to the pathologists. They are many kinds, such as those which infect the whole body so severely that fatal results may follow from contagion. It's a legitimate cause to be separated from your spouse based on serious diseases. Of this sort are malignant and plague-like fevers, leprosy, venereal infections, gangrene, cancer, and others of the same kind. Now, this is perhaps where the one related to cancer popped up in my mind, and the other one really does answer it in terms of cancer being contagious to the whole body. But this seems to be, I'm going to separate from my partner because they have a disease like cancer, which I could get. So, again, that's not the point to pick apart the pathology and the medical stuff here. Yeah.
What's interesting is the evil involved in this.
Right.
In the sense that having some experience with this subject, you find that there are a phenomenal number of men who will abandon their wives if a wife gets cancer because they can't take it. They don't want to have to deal with it. And that's the contagion.
Yeah.
It's appalling.
Well, the evil of self-love, basically.
Yeah.
And the next passage, again, I must have chopped out the number when I cut and pasted it onto this sheet. Person himself who takes the mistress in such circumstances that are not legitimate circumstances does not see that it is abhorrent because the closing of heaven becomes spiritual insanity for that person. But a chaste wife sees it clearly because she is the embodiment of conjugal love, and this love is revolted by such an action as the husband sleeping with another woman. For this reason, too, many of them subsequently refuse any physical union with their husbands as something that would contaminate their chastity by a contagious communication of the lust clinging to the husbands from their promiscuous partner. So that sense of the conjugal with one partner, and it would be the wife in this circumstance, but it could be the husband if the wife were committing adultery or involved with lasciviousness. You don't want to have intimate relationships with that person because you might catch something. Like it just feels horrible because the sensitivities, especially of the chaste wife, are saying that this is contagious. It might appeal to me that this is okay if I'm with him and he's with her. No. So there's a contagious element that is discussed here that I thought was interesting in terms of, well, that spreads. If I don't separate from that adulterous thing, I'll get dirty just by being with that person, even if he's my husband, because he's dirty, and I'm going to get his dirt. I'm going to get his sickness.
Literally could get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah, you could physically
She would
get.
want nothing to do with that.
This is one of those behaviors where there seems to be a close relationship between a physical decision or choice and the resulting disease.
Yeah.
Many disease, you get a cold just by standing there.
Right.
But there are some diseases that could be avoided by avoiding certain behaviors.
Coronis 13. Who does not see the necessity that the evil should be separated from the good, lest the latter, the good, should be infected with the contagion of deadly evil and perish? So just another confirmation of evil is contagious. We pick it up by being around people who are actively involved with evils. Pirates, robbers, adulterers, lascivious people, and thieves. Pirates, the people that
Today's pirates.
the people that steal music off the internet without giving credit to they're pirates. They're pirating people who are selling stuff that doesn't belong to them. It's a form of thievery. We think of pirates as sailors going aboard other people's ships and taking over their ships, but
There is in the Middle East.
yeah, there's still
In the
pirates.
oceans, there are actual pirates.
There are pirates still. Yeah.
But it seems that, with the internet, it's kind of one of your themes on Sunday, but again, it's so much easier to hang out with, not necessarily evil people, but to immerse yourself in evil ideas. Because just, conversations get going, or a website or something, you fall down some rabbit hole of ideas. And if you listen to this stuff a lot, before too long it just starts getting really normal.
Yeah, there's a TV show now. I guess it's been on for quite a while. It's something about a creek, and we used to talk about being up that creek without a paddle. And I said to Gwenda, I said, is that actually what that is? Is that the way I just said it because I read it, and I thought, wait, that's actually the name of a show. And I like the actor, the man, Levine? Yeah, I've loved him. I've loved him in a couple of movies he's done with Steve Martin. Easy, Cheaper by the Dozen or whatever it was.
All-star cast.
Yeah, and then going, why? Because it's okay and it's funny. Let's just have potty humor, primetime potty humor. Okay. Yeah. Carrying on. A couple of divine providence passages to end the class with. We've been talking for almost an hour now. This is talking about the contagion of evil in the Christian world. They also begin to protect themselves by towers, that is, the powerful people in the love of dominion and the love of riches. Earthenworks and walls, from the judge, prince, king, and emperor, as from the head to the body, the lust of dominion spread like a contagion among many. From this arose the degrees of dignities and also honors among them, and with these the love of self and pride in one's own prudence. So we can look at any political system and wonder, is this politicians becoming politicians to be politicians so they can rise in the love of dominion to become more and more powerful, build taller and taller towers or walls, right? Earthenworks. And it wouldn't be funny, but it's not funny. And it's so not funny that you got to laugh. Yeah, yeah. And we laugh. I mean, we can make fun of another community for doing silly things, and we'll be next. You know, it'll never happen here. Sure, we hope not. But the love of dominion is just as much something that everybody's inclined to, whichever side of whatever border you're on, as anybody else. So our English ancestry or German ancestry or whatever ancestry we might have, you can look back in amongst your own ancestors and find as many despots doing their thing during their time. I'm happily descended from King John, the only king who never got another king named King John because he was so horrible. You know, you don't hear King John the Third and the Fourth and the Fifth in England. No, King John of the Magna Carta. That's the only King John. Let's stop there. Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I know of what I speak. I come from a long line of deceivers. And we'll build our earthenworks. We'll do all kinds of things to protect our stash. And that's the nature of evil. You learn from your ancestors how to be evil as well. And you carry on the family tradition. So that's what that divine providence passage is talking about, that the state of the church was such that everybody was doing it. And I know if Roger Schnarr were here, he'd love to remind me that the evil of the ministry is the love of dominion. He likes to remind ministers to keep track of our own evils. And without people like Roger, we probably would anyway, but it's helpful. So this is just one of those passages that reminds that the priesthood is an office in which the love of dominion can easily become powerful and contagious. And if so-and-so can do it and get away with it, why can't I? And the last number, 238 from Divine Providence. The continual increase of hereditary evil is successively derived and transmitted from parents to their offspring. That's similar to the one earlier. And thus by continual increases grows from generation to generation. Ah, the gift that keeps on giving. When evil thus increases among many, it spreads evil amongst many more. And in all evil there is this lust of leading astray. And in some this burns with anger against what is good, giving rise to the contagion of evil. So a little bit of anger thrown in there really helps spread the fire. A little bit of jealousy, a little bit of lust, or a lot. When this has permeated the leaders and the rulers and those prominent in the church, religion becomes perverted, and the means of restoring it to health, which are truths, become corrupted by falsification. Hence, there now proceeds a gradual vastation of good and desolation of truth in the church until it is consummation. Its consummation is reached. Now, those passages I wanted to hand out. I did have an outline of some other things, both from Eric Carswell's paper, sections from the book Hugo Odener, but we spent the hour talking about just these passages, just reconfirming the nature of the contagion of evil and reminding us to take seriously the contagion of natural diseases as well, because we're in a state right now in the natural world where we have one more virus that seems to be pretty stinking serious, and we need to take it seriously. So wash your hands, all you people. And don't touch your face. And cough in your elbow. And throw away the tissue. And wash your hands again. Any more thoughts related to the passages I gave out? You want to go back to that?
No, you interrupted you enough.
Oh.
It's a nice, say a nice list, but I don't really mean nice, but.
Covers the
useful.
subject a little
Useful.
bit. Yeah, it could be
Yeah.
useful. Be
A
reminded.
survey of appropriate, applicable things.
You could leave the extra ones on the table.
Right.
Besides hand sanitizer.
Say what?
Besides the hand sanitizer.
Well, it doesn't say the contagion of evil as I thought I would title it, but the fear and protection from infection. Oh, that's good enough. Yeah. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. So ultimately, the Lord keeps us in natural health and in spiritual health. It's only good from heaven flowing in that keeps restoring our breaking down bodies from just deteriorating after what? Every 7 years, all of your cells are evidently replaced. If that weren't the case, I guess we wouldn't live past 7 if the Lord didn't continually provide for there to be restoration. Yeah. Go ahead.
Here's a theory. The whole point of the immune system is to protect you against these kinds of things. And I'm beginning to think sometimes that the community of men, people, the whole world, actually has something like an immune system. And sometimes these things break down. And sometimes you can find, in some cases medically, if people live in an environment that's too clean, that their immune system, with nothing to do, starts attacking healthy organs. And what we're looking at is, if you look back on the history of the world for 100 years or so, you've got World War I, and then the Great Depression, and then World War II, and then the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, and all these things going on in the Western world, occupying our stress and our attention. And right now, things are pretty good. And maybe the immune system of mankind is starting to realize that, oh, I've got nothing else to attack. So we're starting to get stress and worry about smaller and smaller things. That we're actually attacking, the helicopter parents, all this kind of stuff. Is really just the group immune system reacting to a world that's actually in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Good point.
I just was interested about the comparing the immune system of an individual to that of a community, and and what happens during times of stress.
Overall, amongst our circle, I would say the church people that we know, and we pretty much have typical privileged problems, the problems that people that are privileged have. And I'm not going to say
We have no warm houses and enough food to eat.
pretty much, and then I have the decision of do I get rid of my car now and get a new car later, or oh my goodness, horrible.
The champagne problems.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then eventually I will most likely sicken and die, and that's going to happen no matter what. So, oh well. So with that, folks, I thank you for coming out on this cold but not that horribly cold evening. And for those of you who could attend online, whoever you may be, hope you enjoyed, got something out of the class.